Hello and welcome to Share, Learn, Connect. I am Georgia Lutby and I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet today. Downer employs people across more than 300 sites, primarily in Australia and New Zealand, but also in the Asia-Pacific region, South America and Africa. We pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and recognise and celebrate the diversity of First Peoples across all of the various land, their ongoing cultures and connections to land, sea and community. You are going to love our topic and guest today, where we continue breaking the bias, this time on all things diverse sexualities. In this month's episode, we will take a closer look at how assumptions towards people with diverse sexualities may affect their personal and professional lives, and how we can collectively find ways to enhance workplace inclusion. And our guests are certainly no stranger to this month's topic. During her first 40 years of life, Tanya Best had a few long-term relationships with men, one of which resulted in the birth of her son. She had never had any reason to question her identity. It was only after she met her current partner, Tanya Harper, at Downer 7 years ago that she realised she could have feelings for a woman.
I met Tans. She came into our team and we just became really good friends. You know, we'd go out socially, we'd just talk. Within a couple of months, I started feeling like, one, I was attracted to her. Two, I was attracted to her mind.
Tanya reflects about her journey on discovering her identity and talks about why she counts herself lucky when it comes to coming out in the workplace. Tanya is joined by Emily Mello, who unfortunately had a bit of a different journey. After being sexualised at her previous workplace when starting her career as a labourer, Emily decided it was better to keep her sexual identity to herself in the workplace.
So instead of standing up for myself, I kind of would just shy away a little bit, especially being such a male-dominated industry. I kind of just started keeping it to myself.
Emily shares how the support of previous leaders made her change her mind and how hiding that part of her identity is no longer an option. I hope that you enjoy this chat with Emily and Tanya. Before we get started, I did just want to say that today we'll be hearing about your personal experiences. And of course, no one will be speaking on behalf of others who, whilst may have had similar experiences in their lives, it may have impacted them differently. Today, we hear Tanya and Emily's personal journeys. But I'd like to get started with a question about each of you. Who are you at Downer and who are you outside of Downer, outside of work?
Hi, my name is Emily. I joined the major projects team in utilities about 6 months ago, and I work in the health and safety management. It's a new role, but very, very excited, and it's a new team. So I grew up in Sweden with my mum. My dad's half American Portuguese, so I would go and see him as well. Lived in Australia for a while and then finally settled in New Zealand and got my residency last year. So, woohoo!
Thank you so much. And Tanya?
I've been with Downer coming up 9 years in November. I joined the corrections and justice side, which I'm on now. I've been on this side for the past 4 years. I'm a mum of a son who is 28. Him and his partner or girlfriend live in Wellington. My partner and I moved from Wellington last March up to the sunny Hawke's Bay.
There's no better place in the world, I think, to be than to be outdoors in beautiful New Zealand. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about breaking the bias and specifically about diverse sexualities. We actually reached out to a few people about this topic and some people didn't feel comfortable in participating, and it was an option, of course, for people to share their story or not. I would love to know, what was it that made you want to participate in this episode and to share yourself and your story?
The older I get, the more confident I get. I realize that, I am who I am and there's nothing wrong with who I am. I've probably been my worst enemy and, not always being kind to myself, always comparing myself to people. I had just broken up with my ex-partner and it was a couple months later and I messaged my boss, yay, I'm really excited. I've actually got a date. Our boss, he was always very supportive. And if we had struggles, personally as well, he would always show support. And I think he messaged me and said, oh, lucky guy. And I said, oh, actually, it's a female. And he said, oh, well, lucky female. It was just so accepting. For him, it was just like, yeah, well, that's normal. That was something that really made me open up again a lot more about it. I don't expect to be a role model in any way, but if I can make an impact even for just one person and make them feel more secure in what they identify as. I mean, I don't even put myself in a box in being pansexual. It took me probably about 6 months to even figure out what feels right for me.
And what does it mean to be pansexual?
For me, it doesn't matter what you identify as or what pronouns is the right for that person. It has nothing to do with your body. It has to do with the emotional connection. And for me, that connection of intelligence. I am quite spiritual and I believe in energy and such. So the connection and the emotion is what makes me attracted to someone.
Tanya, I'd love to know from you, what interested you in becoming a part of this episode and gave you the courage to show up today and to speak with us?
Mainly probably to kind of get out of my shell a little bit. And like Emily said, just to let other people know that it's okay to feel like you're not the same as everybody else. And hopefully people that listen will be like, oh, shit, I know someone like Tanya, or maybe I'm a little bit like Tans, or I'm a little bit like, someone else. But just to make them aware that everybody is different and everybody has different views and we're not all going down the same track. And it's all good to kind of just branch yourself off a bit and listen to other people talk.
Thank you so much. I think that's a perfect articulation of the podcast, and the concept behind it is that people will listen and they'll go, wow, I have said that, or I know someone who has the same identity and I haven't felt comfortable asking that question, so they can hear it. I've heard that for a lot of people who are in the LGBTQIA plus community, that they spend a lot of time having to explain to people or to unpick people's perceived assumptions or subconscious biases or whatever they might have. How does it feel to you when someone says lucky guy, or, do you have a boyfriend, or some of those terms that are very assumptive about somebody's sexuality?
To be honest, sometimes myself, I can forget at times and say to someone, oh, is that your husband or is that your wife? I guess that's the thing. We're not perfect. And even people in the community themselves, we don't know everything. We might have to do some research. I do correct people if I need to. Because it is, again, so new, if people assume, I will kind of correct it. And then it's usually depending on how they react. I've learned a lot about that as well, not reacting and kind of taking things in and, maybe asking, why do you think that? Or why is that your understanding and such? Because when I was younger, it would become so sexualized. It was almost like people thought because you identified as someone who would date anyone with that emotional connection, like almost like you were some porn star or something. Whereas now I'm a lot more confident and I definitely question a lot more. And I just don't take shit anymore. Even though I'm very confident and, I definitely don't hide anything. I'm proud of who I am, and you also want to be known for who you are, right? It's the same for people that have, for example, very successful partners, and you're not known as who you are. You're just known as, oh, that's that person's partner. As people, we want to be known for who we are and not depending on what community we're part of or what we identify as.
Love it. And so you shouldn't take shit. Thank you, Emily. Tanya, I'd love to ask you the same question that I asked Emily, how you feel when that happens and what your response is.
I'm a lot better now than I was. So I came out in 2014. We were looking at some furniture and a gentleman came up to me and said, what are you looking for? And I said, oh, my partner and I are looking for a bed. He turned around and says, oh, is he here? And I kind of was a little bit thrown back because I kind of didn't know what to say because I'd never, my first time kind of stuff. And I kind of went to say, oh, yeah. And then I turned around and says, oh, no, he's not here, but my partner is. And he kind of looked at me with a real confused look and he goes, oh, yeah, is he here? And Tams could see that I was starting to get a little bit passionate. And she came up to me and she just says, oh, this is my partner. He almost looked embarrassed because he just assumed, and then a little bit scared because of my reaction. After, we spoke to him and stuff, Tans kind of just said to me, you're going to find this quite a bit, because Tans identifies herself as a lesbian. So she's kind of grown up with this. So there was a lot of learning curves for me. But now, when people say, what does your partner do? Just say, oh, She actually works for Downer as well. I think because there's a lot more education out there now, people kind of know, and so they don't just assume. So it's a little bit better.
I'd love to rewind to the beginning of your lives. And I might start with you, Emily. I would love to know about your upbringing. Tell me a little bit about your early days.
I grew up in a very small village. We were only about 1,000 people and grew up with my mum and my older brother and, had some really good friends back home. But I did also have quite a traumatic childhood, which again was quite hard for me to deal with until I got older. Grew up without having a lot of contact with my dad. And I always had a hard time feeling like I belonged anywhere. Sometimes, I want nothing more than to have the perfect family, the cookie cutter, or that's what I wanted when I was young because I didn't have that. But then as I grew older, I kind of realized that there's no such thing and that's okay. I think I was trying to force myself into being something that I wasn't, realizing about my sexuality and such. When you are in those early 20s, a lot of people kind of think that you're just going through a phase. And you feel sometimes yourself constantly defending yourself to the point where you just end up just feeling, oh, screw it, what's the point? But then, especially lately in the last couple of years, I realized that there's a big point because you can support others that are really struggling with it.
And Tanya, I'd love to hear your story about you being in a heterosexual relationship and then one day. Can you tell me what happened one day?
Well, in my past, I was always in a heterosexual relationship. I'd never even thought about women that way. I started having these feelings and I was just like, oh, hang on a minute. She's a woman and she's a lesbian. I'm not. What's going on in my heart can't be, leading my head. So I kind of stopped talking to her. It didn't feel right with me at that stage. And then I started talking to my son about it. He just said to me, you sound like you are trying to make yourself really unaware of who you think you want to be. And I was just like, well, I don't know. I don't know these feelings. And he was just like, just go with it, Mum. Just don't worry about what's going inside your head or what you think other people are going to say because you've always been a heterosexual. Just let it be. So I'm just like, okay, sweet. This 20-year-old telling his mother, back then it was weird because, we've got a great relationship, but he was the only one that I felt comfortable to talk to because he had kind of the circle of friends that I didn't. I approached Tans and I basically just said to her, look, well, I lie. I didn't approach her. I put it in a text because I was too chicken. I sent her a text just to say, hey, look, I've got these feelings for you. I'm not quite too sure how you feel. I know you have a partner, but I needed to let you know how I felt. I said, because it's driving me crazy. And then basically she texted me back like within 10 minutes and said, I feel exactly the same way. And I was just like, what? And all what I said to myself was, what the hell have I done? This is real, She came to it the next day. We spoke about it and we both agreed that nothing would go any further because she was in a relationship. She'd been with her partner for 10 years. Well, my ex-partner got onto my Facebook and read the messages between Tans and I. There was no sexual anything like that, but we were messaging about our feelings. And he got hold of Tans's partner at the time. Wow. Yeah. So Tans obviously left her partner. Tans and I have been together for coming up 8 years. The good thing about what had happened was Tans' ex-partner and her partner now, and Tans and I were best friends. She didn't say she forgave me because there was nothing to forgive about. Basically, she just said, Tans and I, we were at the end of a relationship. We had our journey. Now it's yours and Tans' journey.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty much my reaction. Just wow.
I would love to talk about the term coming out. Can one of you describe to our listeners what coming out is? Has that been something that you've had as a part of your life experience? And what does that mean to you?
I always felt like coming out, that it was this big thing where you almost had like a big announcement of this is who I am. And, in reality, for me, coming out has not been anything really. It's not like I'm announcing anything. It's more just me not holding back anymore, not thinking about how are they going to react. I'm probably the wrong person to answer it because I've never had anything such as coming out. So I think for me, it hasn't been coming out as such. It's just not staying in.
I love that. What about you, Tanya? I think you would have had a bit of a different experience, perhaps.
I don't think I actually came out. I just told people. I told the family. Like, I remember telling my grandparents, and they had no idea what I was going on about. Like, my nan was just like, so you're telling me you've fallen in love with a woman? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, okay, cool. She goes, so, why did you have to sit down and explain it to us? I suppose that was my first experience of coming out to my grandparents. Spoke to mum about it, spoke to my father, and then my sister, who didn't quite understand. She didn't ever think I would be the person to fall in love with a woman. She told me a few years after Tans and I, she goes, sister, I didn't think it would ever happen to you. I don't think anything's kind of happened to me. I've fallen in love. This is how simple it is. I've fallen in love with a woman. My friends were a little bit different. They'd grown up with me and just thought I was going through a midlife crisis. So it kind of took different kind of turns, I suppose.
Have either of you found that people treat you differently when they understand what your sexual identity is rather than prior? I know you mentioned, Emily, that you had some experiences where people sort of sexualized it. Any other experiences that you've had where people might treat you differently or might bring in unconscious biases that they may have?
I think because people have heard the terms, gay, bisexual, lesbian, such. Pansexual, I think, is a new thing for people to hear. They're kind of be like, I think you're just bi. And I'm like, no. I know myself what I identify as. I think sometimes people are actually a little bit scared because they're scared of saying the wrong thing. So they might retract. Sometimes it might be because they don't want to pry as well, And I think that's why it's really, really important that we normalize it and also let it be okay for people to ask if they're not sure. And I think the thing is as well, as people, we're always growing, and what you feel like you identify as now might not be what you identify as in a year, 5 years, 10 years, The worst for me was definitely when I was younger and I was working on sites with like 700 men. They would find it out and then it would be very, very sexualized. They kind of start saying comments, which now that I'm older, I actually understand, could be sexual harassment in a way. My ex-partner, he was always quite supportive, but people would ask me out on dates and I'd say, but I have a partner. And they'd kind of say, yeah, but you have a male partner, so you can have a female one too, right? No, this is, I'm in a monogamous relationship.
A few years ago, someone said to me, the only wrong question to ask is the question that you don't ask when it's truly something that you're trying to educate yourself better on. How do you feel about that? Is it that you appreciate people asking questions if it comes from a true place of wanting to understand?
I do. I think there's definitely a limit, but I think that comes to what you would ask anyone. I know one of my friends who identifies as male, but he's homosexual and he has a child with his husband. And people kind of say, how does that work? Like, that can't be, whose kid is it? It can't be, if it comes from a place where they want to be educated, but non-judgmental, absolutely, ask away. We can tell so much by body language. And that's why I think it is really important that you only do ask if you are open-minded and genuinely want to understand. A way that you can usually tell if someone has a bad reaction is, they kind of move away a bit, or they'll kind of start putting their hands up or arms together, and it's kind of that a bit more protective body language. You can be polite, but still show like, this is my boundary.
As a society, and for those listening, what do you think that people can do to support others who have a different sexual identity to them? What advice would you give to people who want to do more or perhaps want to be an ally? And I'd love if either of you are experienced with the term ally, what that means, and any stories you'd like to tell on that front.
Ally, I guess, shows that you're supportive and that you are non-judgmental. As people, we should always be questioning things or always be learning things. That is what life is about, isn't it? Personal growth and educating yourself.
If I'm going to be really honest, I actually didn't even realise that there were pronouns until our community, we had discussion on about it maybe over a month ago now. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea that you can have pronouns. And so when my partner got home and I talked to her about it, she goes, there's all sorts. And I says, I had no idea. I actually spoke to my son about it. He knew about it. He had a lot of gay friends and he had a lot of lesbian friends as well. He had heard of in his group kind of stuff. And I just said to him, well, why didn't you tell me? You could have told me about it. And he goes, well, I just assumed that you knew. So there's still lots of learning, that's for sure.
And I think life is evolving education, isn't it? And I think the most important part is that when you do learn, that people take it and embrace it and use what they've learned to apply day to day.
I think the pronouns thing is a bit, I definitely think we need to get that into the workplace a lot more and into society. It's not about your sexuality, it's what you identify as a person. Whereas with the sexuality part, that can be private and people don't have to want to know about that, and that's okay. I probably wouldn't want to discuss it in the middle of the office because, I'm not a show horse. I'm not here for someone's entertainment. If you genuinely want to know, come and ask me when it's a bit private.
Thank you. And Tanya?
Kind of on the same page with Emily as well. There's a lot more information that's accessible to people now who kind of want to find out a little bit more without asking someone because they're not quite too sure how to. I wouldn't know how to ask anybody without thinking that I'm going to offend them. But knowing there's a community at Downer, and if people want to know about us as the community, that they can always jump on board or, come to maybe one of our meetings.
Thank you. And what's something that the leaders of Downer could do to help to break the bias and to help to progress everybody to feel accepted and comfortable in their roles?
More involvement of the community, pushing more for things to happen. I mean, we got a rainbow tick, which is great. It's amazing. But you then have to continue pushing for those changes to happen. For example, if all the leaders could openly show that they were allies, that's an example because obviously people look up to a leader. They should show by example. They should show compassion. They should want the success of the people working with them. I think that's really what makes a big difference between what is a leader and what is a manager. I actually don't think that they have to do a major change. I think they just have to be supportive and be transparent of them being supportive.
I totally agree. I think with the leaders, because there's so many of them, so it's trying to figure out who to get involved, because at the end of the day, it's their time that we're asking for. However, we need to be able to approach these leaders. Some of them probably don't even know about our community, and that's no fault of theirs. It's just they get so wrapped up and busy that they just don't see outside what they're doing. There's lots of ways, but word of mouth and trying to get it in front of our leaders would be a start.
And I would love to know, before we finish up, what do you want your legacy to be at Downer?
I want to be someone who has been known for driving positive change, being supportive, and unite people as much as possible.
And Tanya?
To be kind of known as someone that's quite open and genuinely just a nice person, that if she had any questions that she would be happy to answer about anything of herself.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you very much for your time and for your openness and for sharing your story. I think we're going to have a lot of listeners who will be nodding along or who will learn something. I certainly have learned a few things along the way. Thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us. It's been great. Loved it.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to today's episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. I found today's episode so insightful when Emily and Tanya shared their stories about the importance of education and about asking questions and taking the time to understand those around us and their experiences. I could only imagine what it's like to experience some of the subconscious biases and people's preconceived ideas. I am so lucky to have so many beautiful team members, friends and family members who are in the LGBTIQA+ community, and it is such a pleasure to know them and to see all of the value that they add. Today's episode, we were going to have 3 guests. And unfortunately, our third guest thought about it and they didn't want to become someone at Downer who was labelled. Even in 2022, some people didn't feel confident sharing their true selves with a wider audience. So let this be a reminder to all of us, and it certainly was to me, that we need to be allies. We need to show those around us that we support them, show visibly that you are here to support everyone to bring their true self to work. to be themselves and to not feel like they have to hide any part of them. Thank you for listening. And before we finish up, I would like to take the time to acknowledge the Yuggera people, the traditional custodians of the land where this episode has been recorded. Make sure you tune into next month where I speak to a brand new guest about a brand new topic as we continue to share, learn, connect. This podcast is now available on your favourite podcast app. Please share it with your friends and make sure to subscribe. And what that means is that you will get our episodes as soon as they drop. Our producers are Darby Martinelli and Melanie Blows, and I'm Georgia Lutby. Thank you for listening.